Elijah woke up every morning with a weight on his chest that had no physical explanation. Doctors would have found nothing wrong. Friends would have said he looked fine. But the heaviness was real. It followed him from the moment his eyes opened until the moment exhaustion finally pulled him into shallow sleep. The alarm rang, sharp, unforgiving. He stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks he already knew by heart, feeling tired before the day had even begun. His body remained still, but his mind was already running. Thoughts rushed in without invitation, colliding, overlapping, repeating themselves with cruel familiarity. You are behind. You should be further by now. Others figured it out. You didn't. Elijah did not speak these words out loud. He didn't need to. The voice lived inside him. It had lived there for years, growing louder with time. From the outside, his life looked acceptable. He had a job. He paid his bills. He showed up on time. He answered messages. He smiled when expected. People described him as responsible, quiet, reliable, a man who was doing okay. But inside, he was slowly collapsing. What frightened him most was that there had been no single dramatic failure to explain it. No great catastrophe, no public humiliation, no moment where everything had clearly fallen apart. Instead, it was a quiet erosion, a slow wearing down of confidence, a gradual loss of belief. Day after day, Elijah felt like he was surviving rather than living. He moved through life on autopilot. He showered without feeling the water. He ate without tasting the food. He drove familiar roads without remembering the drive. Conversations passed through him without leaving a trace. And always, the noise. At work, he completed tasks efficiently, but without presence. His body was there, his hands moved, his mouth spoke, but his mind was elsewhere. It was busy replaying the past or rehearsing imagined disasters of the future. At night, when the world finally quieted down, his mind grew louder. The past arrived first. Moments he wished he could erase replayed with painful clarity, choices he regretted, words he wished he had spoken differently, opportunities he believed he had missed forever. Every memory seemed to whisper the same accusation. You should have known better. You wasted your chance. This is your fault. Then came the future. It appeared not as hope, but as threat. A long, grey stretch of days just like this one. The fear of stagnation. The dread of waking up 10 years later in the same place, with the same thoughts, the same weight, the same quiet despair. Sometimes Elijah lay awake in the dark, eyes open, heart racing, wondering if this was simply who he was. If some people were born with an internal fire and others were born to endure life quietly, without joy, without direction. He told himself he had no right to complain. Other people had it worse. Other people were suffering real tragedies. His life, on paper, was fine. And yet, the emptiness remained. That contradiction made him feel weak. He had tried to be positive. He really had. He read motivational quotes, watched inspiring videos, told himself that things would get better, that tomorrow would be different, that he just needed to think more positively. But the optimism never lasted. It felt forced, artificial, like painting over rust. The cracks always came back, and every time they did, the disappointment cut deeper, reinforcing the belief that positivity simply wasn't for people like him. There was a quiet shame in that belief. Elijah began to avoid silence because silence gave his thoughts too much room. He filled his time with distractions, noise, screens, endless scrolling, anything to keep the mind occupied. Anything to avoid hearing that voice too clearly, but distraction only postponed the inevitable. The moment he stopped, the thoughts returned. One evening, after a particularly draining day, Elijah sat alone in his apartment, lights off, city sounds drifting in through the window. He felt empty in a way that scared him. Not sad enough to cry, not angry enough to act, just hollow. That was the night he admitted something he had never said out loud before. "I don't know what I'm doing with my life." The words felt heavy, but also honest. He realized then that he wasn't just tired. He was lost. Lost without direction, lost without purpose, lost inside his own mind. In the weeks that followed, Elijah became painfully aware of his inner dialogue. It was harsh, relentless, unforgiving. Every mistake, no matter how small, became evidence against him. Every delay felt like confirmation that he was failing. He noticed how quickly his mind assumed the worst, how easily fear took control, how naturally he drifted towards self-doubt. It was as if his thoughts were not on his side. That realization unsettled him. One afternoon, during a break at work, he overheard two co-workers talking quietly near the window. He wasn't trying to listen, but one sentence cut through the background noise and caught his attention. "He doesn't comfort people," one of them said. "No," the other replied, "but no one leaves unchanged." Elijah looked up. They were talking about a man, someone who lived quietly on the edge of town, someone people went to when they were tired of lying to themselves, someone who, according to rumor, helped people regain control of their minds. Some said the man was too harsh. Others said he spoke uncomfortable truths. A few claimed he changed lives. Most people laughed it off. Elijah didn't laugh. The idea stayed with him. It followed him home. It echoed in his thoughts, not as hope exactly, but as possibility. A small crack in the wall he had built around his despair. For days, he argued with himself, "You don't need this. It won't work. You've tried before." But another voice, quieter and less familiar, began to speak up. What if the problem isn't life? What if the problem is how you're thinking? That question unsettled him more than any negative thought ever had, because if the problem was external, he was powerless. But if the problem was internal, responsibility would be unavoidable. One evening, after another sleepless night, Elijah made a decision that felt both insignificant and monumental. He would go, not because he believed it would fix everything, not because he was optimistic, but because he was exhausted from surviving. The place was simple, no signs, no advertisements, no promises written on walls, just a quiet space surrounded by stillness. The man was already seated when Elijah arrived. He didn't ask Elijah's name. He didn't ask what he did for a living. He simply looked at him. The kind of look that makes you feel seen and exposed at the same time. After a long silence, the man spoke. "There are two kinds of people in this world." Elijah felt his chest tighten. "Those who go through life defeated, tired, complaining, surviving one day at a time, and those who stand tall in adversity, who rise when others quit, who win." Elijah knew immediately which group he belonged to. The man continued, calm and direct. "The difference is not intelligence, not luck, not education. It is mental attitude." Elijah felt something shift inside him, not relief, not comfort, something sharper, responsibility. And before he could respond, the man asked the question that would expose everything. "What is controlling your mind today?" Elijah opened his mouth, then closed it again. Fear, doubt, resentment, self-pity. He didn't need to say it. The answer was written all over his life. The man nodded slowly. "The mind does not remain neutral," he said. "If you do not direct it, the world will. If you do not master it, something else will." For the first time in a long time, Elijah felt afraid in a different way. Not afraid of failing, afraid of staying the same. And deep down, he knew something important. This was only the beginning. The silence between Elijah and the man felt heavier than any words that could have been spoken. It wasn't an awkward silence, it was deliberate. the kind of silence that strips a person of their rehearsed explanations, their excuses, their carefully constructed stories. Elijah shifted slightly in his chair, suddenly aware of his own breathing, of the tension in his shoulders, of how exposed he felt sitting there. The man finally spoke again. "Most people come here thinking they have a problem with life," he said calmly. "Very few realize they have a problem with their thinking." Elijah swallowed. "I don't know how to stop it," he admitted. "The thoughts, they just come." The man nodded, as if he had heard this sentence thousands of times. "Of course they do," he replied. "You trained them to." That sentence landed harder than Elijah expected. "I didn't train anything," Elijah protested instinctively. "I never wanted to think this way." The man leaned forward slightly. "No one wants weeds in their garden," he said, "but neglect grows them anyway." Elijah frowned. "You mean this is my fault?" The man did not soften his response. "I mean, it is your responsibility." That distinction mattered more than Elijah realized at first. Fault implied shame. Responsibility implied power. The man stood up slowly and walked a few steps, his hands resting behind his back. "Let me tell you something most people will never accept," he continued. "Your mental attitude is the only thing in your life over which you have complete, unchallenged control." Elijah felt resistance rise inside him. "What about circumstances?" he asked. "What about what happens to us?" The man turned and looked directly at him. "You don't control what happens," he said. "You control what happens inside you because of it." Elijah leaned back, his mind racing. This was not comforting, this was confrontational. And yet, something about it felt undeniably true. The man continued, "The mind is never idle. It is always under the influence of something. Fear, faith, doubt, desire. If you do not choose the influence, it will be chosen for you." Elijah thought about his days, the constant stream of news, the endless comparisons, the quiet self-criticism. He had never consciously chosen any of it. It had simply happened. "That voice in your head," the man said, as if reading Elijah's thoughts, "the one that tells you you're behind, that you're weak, that you're failing. You didn't wake up one day with that voice. It was built." "How?" Elijah asked. "Through repetition," the man replied. "Through experience, through environment, through what you allowed to occupy your mind daily." Elijah felt a strange mix of anger and relief. Anger that this had happened without his awareness. Relief that maybe it wasn't permanent. "So what do I do?" Elijah asked quietly. The man smiled, but it was not a comforting smile. It was the smile of someone about to tell the truth. "You decide," he said. "Decide what?" "You decide who governs your mind." The man paused, then added something that sent a chill through Elijah. "If you don't, something else will." Elijah thought of how often fear dictated his choices, how often avoidance felt safer than action, how often comfort won over growth. The man sat back down. "Let me ask you something," he said. "Do you know what failure really is?" Elijah hesitated. "Losing," he guessed. The man shook his head. "Failure is the gradual surrender of mental discipline." That sentence echoed. "Most people don't fail dramatically," the man continued. "They fail quietly. They fail by allowing negative thinking to become habitual. They fail by drifting, and a drifting mind is the easiest mind to control." Elijah felt exposed. Drift described his life perfectly. "I spent decades studying men who built extraordinary lives," the man said. "Not because they were spared hardship, but because they developed an unbreakable mental attitude." Elijah listened intently. "They invited failure," the man continued. "They studied it, they used it. They understood that every setback carried information." Elijah thought of his own failures, how he had used them as proof that he should stop trying. "That's where you went wrong," the man said gently. "You interpreted failure as a verdict instead of feedback." The words settled slowly. "So how do I change?" Elijah asked again. The man raised a finger. "First, you must understand this. Positive mental attitude is not pretending everything is fine. It is not forced optimism. It is not denying pain." Elijah nodded. "It is the discipline of directing your thoughts even when your emotions resist," the man continued. "It is acting with faith when fear is louder. It is choosing purpose when comfort is tempting." Elijah felt something stir inside him. Not excitement, determination. "But I don't feel strong," Elijah admitted. "I feel tired." The man's response was immediate. "Strength is not a feeling," he said. "It is a decision repeated daily." He leaned closer. "And that repetition begins with purpose." Elijah's chest tightened. "Without a definite purpose," the man said, "the mind wanders. And when the mind wanders, fear takes the wheel." Elijah realized he had never truly chosen a direction. He had reacted, adjusted, settled, drifted. "What do you want?" the man asked suddenly. The question caught Elijah off guard. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "That," the man said, "is the root of your suffering." He let the silence stretch. No man can develop a powerful mental attitude without a goal so clear, so consuming, that it organizes his thoughts automatically. The man continued, "Purpose gives the mind a spine." Elijah felt a deep discomfort. He had lived for years without a spine. "Tonight," the man said, "you will not change your life, but you will begin changing your mind." He gave Elijah his first instruction. "For the next 30 days, every morning and every night, you will speak aloud the kind of man you are becoming, not what you feel, not what you see, what you choose." Elijah frowned. "That sounds fake." The man smiled. "Everything real begins as imagined." He continued, "Your subconscious does not reason. It accepts repetition. Whatever you repeatedly say with emotion, it absorbs." Elijah thought of the years he had repeated doubt. "You have been practicing fear," the man said. "Now you will practice faith." Elijah nodded slowly. "And understand this," the man added. "Negative thoughts are not visitors. They are invaders. If you tolerate them, they take over." Elijah felt a jolt. "When fear appears," the man said, "you stop it. You do not negotiate with it. You replace it." "With what?" Elijah asked. "With truth," the man replied. "With purpose, with gratitude, with disciplined thought." Elijah exhaled deeply. This was not easy. This was not gentle. But for the first time in a long time, it felt real. As Elijah stood to leave, the man said one last thing. "This will offend your excuses," he said, "but it will free your future." Elijah walked out into the fading light, his mind heavy but strangely alert. Nothing had changed yet, but something had been confronted, and he knew deep down that there was no turning back. Elijah thought the hardest part would be starting. He was wrong. The hardest part was continuing. The first morning after leaving the man's place, Elijah woke up before the alarm, not because he felt motivated, but because his mind wouldn't let him sleep. The conversation replayed itself again and again. Your mental attitude is your responsibility. Your mind is never neutral. Without purpose, the mind drifts. He sat on the edge of the bed, feet on the cold floor, staring at the wall. The instruction was clear. Speak aloud who you are becoming. He hesitated. It felt unnatural, forced, almost embarrassing, even though he was alone. His mind immediately pushed back. "This is pointless. You don't believe this. You're lying to yourself." Elijah recognized the voice. He had heard it for years. The difference now was that he noticed it. He inhaled slowly and spoke anyway. "I am becoming a disciplined man. I am learning to govern my mind. I act with purpose. Even when I feel fear, The words sounded hollow at first. They echoed awkwardly in the quiet room. No surge of confidence followed, no emotional breakthrough. Nothing happened, and yet something had happened. He had acted in opposition to his habitual thinking. That day, the resistance continued. At work, Elijah noticed how quickly his thoughts slipped back into old patterns. One small mistake triggered a cascade of self-criticism. One awkward interaction replayed itself repeatedly. You see, you're still the same. This won't last. Normally, those thoughts would have gone unchallenged. They would have shaped his mood, his posture, his energy. This time, he paused. He remembered the words. Negative thoughts are invaders. He didn't argue with the thought. He didn't try to reason with it. He simply replaced it. I'm learning. This does not define me. I choose discipline over drift. It felt mechanical, unemotional. But again, something subtle shifted. The days that followed were uncomfortable in a new way. Elijah became aware of how undisciplined his mind truly was. Thoughts wandered constantly. Fear appeared without warning. Doubt disguised itself as logic. He realized something unsettling. His mind had been running his life, and it did not want to give up control. The resistance intensified. Some mornings, Elijah didn't want to speak the words. He felt tired, empty, unconvinced. On those mornings, the old voice was loudest. What's the point? You'll fail anyway. You always do. Those were the most important mornings, because Elijah began to understand a truth most people never accept. Mental strength is not built when things feel good. It is built when discipline replaces emotion. He spoke the words anyway, not with excitement, with resolve. Slowly something changed, not externally, internally. Elijah started noticing a gap, a small space between a thought and his reaction. A moment where he could choose. Before, fear had been automatic. Now, it was optional. The man had been right. Strength was not a feeling. It was a decision repeated daily. But the war was far from over. One evening, after a particularly long day, Elijah skipped his routine. He told himself he deserved rest, just for today. That night, the old thoughts returned with force. You see how fragile this is. One bad day and you're back where you started. Elijah lay awake, frustration building. He realized something else then. The mind looks for consistency. Miss enough days and it will pull you back to what is familiar. The next morning, he corrected course. No drama, no guilt, just discipline. He recommitted. That's when the external world began to react, not in dramatic ways, in subtle ones. Elijah started responding differently to stress. When things went wrong, he no longer collapsed internally. He adjusted. When criticism came, he listened without crumbling. When fear appeared, he acknowledged it without obeying it. People noticed. A co-worker remarked that he seemed calmer. Another commented that he handled pressure differently now. Elijah didn't explain. He barely understood it himself. Inside, however, the war continued. One afternoon, something significant happened. A project he had quietly invested hope in failed completely, publicly. Old Elijah would have taken this as confirmation. Proof that nothing had changed. Proof that hope was dangerous. For a moment, the familiar weight returned. You tried. You failed. That's your answer. Elijah felt the pull, the temptation to surrender, to retreat into numbness. Then he remembered another truth. You are never a victim of circumstance, only of your response. That night, Elijah didn't numb himself. He sat with the discomfort. He allowed the disappointment to exist without letting it define him. He spoke aloud again. This failure is not my end. This is feedback. This is training. The words carried more weight this time because they were tested. Elijah realized then that autosuggestion was not about pretending. It was about conditioning. about teaching the mind what to return to under pressure. Fear still appeared. Doubt still whispered. But they no longer ruled uncontested. Discipline had begun to take root. Elijah started changing small habits. He limited what he consumed mentally. Less noise, less meaningless input, more intentional reading, more silence. Silence, once terrifying, became instructive. In that silence, Elijah discovered something surprising. He wasn't broken. He had been undirected, without purpose. His mind had wandered, and a wandering mind always turns against itself. Now, slowly, his thoughts were aligning around something greater than comfort. The war inside his mind was not over, but for the first time in his life, Elijah knew which side he was on, and that made all the difference. Growth rarely announces itself with comfort. For Elijah, it arrived disguised as pressure. As his internal discipline strengthened, the external world seemed to respond with resistance. Challenges multiplied. Expectations increased. Situations arose that demanded more than he felt ready to give. It was as if life was asking a single question over and over again. Are you serious about this, or is this just another phase? The real test came quietly, a responsibility he could not avoid, a decision he could not postpone, stakes that felt higher than anything he had faced before. Elijah felt the familiar tension return, the tightness in the chest, the accelerated thoughts, the old fear knocking at the door. You're not ready. You're going to fail. This is too much. But something was different now. The fear no longer surprised him. He expected it. He had learned that fear does not disappear when you grow. It simply changes form. It becomes more sophisticated, more convincing, more personal. This time, it spoke with logic. Be careful, don't risk too much, protect yourself. Elijah recognized the strategy. Fear had learned to disguise itself as wisdom. The pressure intensified. Long hours, uncertainty, moments where the outcome was completely out of his control. People depended on him now, whether he wanted that responsibility or not. Sleep became lighter. Thoughts returned at night, but they no longer spiraled uncontrollably. They circled one central question: who are you going to be under pressure? One evening, everything collapsed at once. A critical effort failed, not privately, publicly. There were consequences, real ones: financial strain, disappointment from others, silence from those who had promised support. Elijah felt the impact immediately. The old voice surged back with full force. This proves it. You overreached. You should have stayed where it was safe. For the first time since beginning his mental discipline, Elijah felt genuinely shaken, not discouraged, shaken. He sat alone, staring at the floor, the weight pressing down harder than ever before. The temptation to quit was no longer subtle. It was loud, persuasive. You tried. You failed. You can stop now. The idea of surrender felt comforting, like rest. That's when Elijah realized something crucial. Quitting doesn't always look like giving up in despair. Sometimes it looks like relief. He understood then why so many people never reach the next level. They confuse peace with escape. The pressure was unbearable. And then, in the middle of that mental storm, a single thought emerged, clear, steady, unemotional. This is the moment, not the moment of victory, the moment of decision. Elijah stood up slowly. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear alone, but from the intensity of what was at stake. He spoke aloud, his voice low but firm. I will not let this define me. No anger, no drama, just resolve. He didn't deny the pain. He didn't pretend the failure hadn't happened. He acknowledged it fully, and then he did something new. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" he asked, "What is this preparing me for?" That question changed everything. The failure no longer felt like an ending. It felt like a test. In the days that followed, Elijah moved differently, slower but more deliberate. He took responsibility without self-punishment. He listened without defensiveness. He adjusted without shame. Some people lost faith in him, others criticized, a few quietly respected his response. Elijah learned another hard truth. You cannot control how others interpret your adversity. You can only control how you embody it. The pain didn't vanish, the consequences didn't magically resolve, but Elijah didn't collapse internally, and that was the victory. He remembered something the man had said. Every adversity carries the seed of an equal or greater benefit. At the time, it had sounded like a cliché. Now it felt like law. The setback forced Elijah to confront weaknesses he had ignored, gaps in preparation, blind spots in thinking, habits that still needed discipline. Instead of breaking him, the pressure refined him. He became more focused, less reactive, more grounded. He no longer needed constant reassurance. His confidence was quieter now, built on resilience rather than optimism. One night, exhausted but clear-minded, Elijah reflected on how close he had come to surrendering. He understood something deeply personal. This wasn't about success anymore. It was about identity. If he quit now, he wouldn't just be walking away from a goal. He would be reinforcing the old belief that pressure meant retreat. And that belief, once reinforced, would return again and again. Elijah made a private vow. No matter how this turns out, I will not betray who I am becoming. That vow became his anchor. From that point on, Elijah no longer measured progress by results alone. He measured it by response. Did I act with discipline? Did I choose responsibility over reaction? Did I govern my mind under pressure? Those questions guided him forward. Slowly, opportunities emerged, not dramatic ones, small openings, new connections, subtle shifts, nothing spectacular, but enough to continue, enough to rebuild, enough to confirm that resilience creates its own momentum. Elijah understood now. Life doesn't reward those who avoid pressure. It shapes those who endure it consciously. He had crossed a line. There was no return to drifting, no return to mental surrender. The point of no return wasn't success, it was self-trust. And once a man trusts himself under pressure, he becomes very difficult to defeat. Something subtle had changed in Elijah. It wasn't visible at first. There was no dramatic victory, no applause, no moment where everything suddenly made sense. In fact, from the outside, his life looked remarkably ordinary. But inside, the foundation was different. Elijah no longer woke up asking how he felt. He woke up asking who he had decided to be. That single shift altered everything. His thoughts still appeared, but they no longer ruled unchecked. Fear still spoke, but it no longer held authority. Doubt still visited, but it was no longer welcomed as truth. He had learned that an unbreakable mental attitude is not loud, it is steady. Purpose had become the organizing force of his mind, not a vague wish, not a hopeful idea, a definite aim. Elijah had finally defined what he wanted, not just in outcome, but in identity. He knew the kind of man he was becoming, and that clarity acted like a compass. When distractions appeared, they were measured against that purpose. When temptation whispered comfort, it was weighed against long-term meaning. When hardship returned, it was framed as refinement, not punishment. He understood now what most people never realize. The mind drifts only when it has nothing worthy to anchor to. With a clear purpose, his thoughts aligned naturally, not perfectly, but consistently. Elijah's discipline deepened. He protected his mental environment with intention. He chose carefully what he listened to, what he read, who he allowed influence over his thinking. He stopped explaining himself to people who were committed to misunderstanding him. He no longer sought validation from those who were uncomfortable with growth. That alone gave him peace. he had learned another vital truth. Environment is stronger than willpower. So he designed his environment intentionally. Fewer distractions, more structure, more silence, more reflection. Silence was no longer threatening. It was grounding. In that silence, Elijah began to hear something he had not heard in years, his own inner authority. When challenges arose, he no longer asked, "Can I handle this?" He asked, "What does this require of me?" That question made him adaptable instead of fragile. Failure still occurred, setbacks still came. Life did not suddenly become kind, but Elijah had become resilient in a way that could not be taken from him. He had stopped identifying with outcomes. He identified with response, and that changed how people saw him. Others began to notice the calm, the steadiness, the absence of panic under pressure. Some asked questions, some watched quietly, some resisted the example. Elijah didn't teach. He embodied. He understood something important. True leadership is energetic. People feel it before they understand it. One evening, long after the hardest chapter had passed, Elijah found himself reflecting on the journey, on how close he had come to surrendering to mental drift, on how easily his life could have remained small. He realized then that the most dangerous enemy he had ever faced was not failure. It was passivity, the slow acceptance of mediocrity, the quiet agreement with fear, the habit of letting the mind wander without direction. Breaking free from that had not required luck or talent or permission. It had required a decision to own his thoughts, a decision to govern his inner world, a decision to refuse surrender, even when surrender felt comfortable. Elijah understood now why so many people never reach their potential. They wait for motivation, they wait for confidence, they wait for circumstances to change, but confidence follows discipline, motivation follows purpose. And circumstances respond to those who move first, internally. He had learned to act as if failure were impossible, not because he believed he would never fall, but because he understood that falling was not failure. Failure was quitting mentally, and that, he had decided, would never happen again. Elijah's life did not become perfect. It became aligned with purpose, aligned with responsibility, aligned with inner strength. He had become unbreakable not because nothing could hurt him, but because nothing could own him. His attitude was no longer rented to circumstance. It was owned, and ownership changed everything. If Elijah could speak to the man he once was, the tired one, the drifting one, the one surviving day by day, he would not offer comfort. He would offer truth. You are not weak. You are undirected, and direction changes destiny. Elijah walked forward now with quiet certainty, not because he knew exactly how everything would unfold, but because he trusted who he had become, and that trust made him unstoppable. Because when a man masters his mental attitude, the world may resist him, but it will never break him.